maybe 15 foot and also they gotta fix it.
Yes. Yeah. You're a little young.
Yeah.
We had a guy.
My still full 30 years.
So we came on this. My friend told me about it. Yeah, he actually bought it. There's no
Can you introduce them? Okay, I just want to sit here and
Yeah, it was good there. For
I just want to sit here and get us.
Yeah, just give them this.
Okay.
Where's your student fire? That's true, Larry.
long travel.
You'll see it side.
Point number 2, it says
Well,
you have 2 minutes. You can address a lot of
I'll get off.
Sean,
Including travel.
did we let water
Ready?
Yeah.
We sold last year.
Did we, sorry? Did we?
Consume.
I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting of Monday, March 9th for the town of Oliver. Are there any late items?
Thank you, Chairman Mattis. Have to remember what to say. I would like to add on one item, a closed item at the end of the meeting if possible for, under.
Duly noted. Adoption of the agenda. Move Councillor Schwarzenbeck, Berger, second by Councillor Megila. All those in favor? Carried. Adoption of prior minutes, adoption of February 24, 2020 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Move the adoption. Second, Councillor Schwarzenberger, all those in favor? Carried. Presentations. We're gonna have the Government Finance Officers Association Canadian Award for Financial Reporting Fiscal Year 2018. The CFO and staff, if they are in the room, could they please come forward? Mary will. Come on,
It's hiding. Oh, thank you.
We have Doug Leahy, the CFO, Marcus Liebler, the deputy CFO, Heather Wilson, retired deputy clerk, she's not here, Connie McGoffin, payroll clerk, and Holly Walton, the accounts payable, accounts receivable clerk. The Canadian Award for Financial Reporting Program was established to encourage municipal governments throughout Canada to publish high-quality financial reports and to provide peer recognition and technical guidance for officials preparing these reports. This attainment represents a significant accomplishment by our local government and its management. It's not the first time we've won it. You guys have consistently done outstanding work. I know we all appreciate it when we get the reports. Thank you.
It's been great. It's been hard hard work. I've only been involved in one of these, so the last 6 before me, I think we said 7 years, Kathy, or 8?
7 years.
7, so the other staff before me, but Marcus will soon be carrying the torch even further, so, but it's a really a great reward. I also want to give kudos to Diane Begovich, because she puts it all together, and she makes it look really nice. We do the hard stuff with the numbers, but she actually puts it to mean something, so great job, Diane.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great job for all of you, really. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're done.
Okay, moving to business, we have the Actionable Economic Development Strategy. We have first names here from Mr. Ingram and Mr. Konyk from EcoPlan Consulting. I would refer the item to the CEO to give us a little background.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Chairman Mattis.
That's okay.
The Actionable Economic Development Plan it's a draft that's being presented today, and it's through the Rural Dividend Fund that we have the funding for this item, and they've been working on this particular item for, I think, about 9 months now. About 9 months or better?
6 to 9.
6 to 9 months. And they did present earlier today to the committee, and now they are coming forward to present to you and to ask for your feedback on it so that we can get a proper document that will really help us grow our economy and our community. It's John Ingram and Jordan.
John and Jordan,
Yes. So,
welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Do I have to press anything special?
oh, here,
Flip that one.
I'm pressing something special.
There you go.
Thank you, Council. So I'm John, and just by way of introduction, I've also had the good fortune to work with Oliver before on the official community plan update in 2016? 17, and the Downtown Oliver Action Plan that followed in 2017. And are working on this, and also we recently, well, when I say we, I'm using Royal because really it was Jordan who produced the housing assessment report that was tabled a few weeks back. So we know we don't have too much time. I'm going to give you a quick overview in the next half hour of the presentation, hopefully leaving some time for questions at the end. There are copies of the document, and we are going, it is a draft, and we are here to present, but also get a lot of feedback. We won't be going through the whole document because there are 19 actions that it includes, so we're just going to kind of pick a few highlights to present. So to begin, why are we calling it Grow Oliver? We had a survey that hopefully you were all able to participate in, where we asked people for suggestions about names. What can we call the strategy? And a lot of them were wine and agriculture themed, given the area, and Grow Oliver really kind of jumped out to us, and there's some similar names as well. And really what we're talking about here is growing the local economy, and also as our designer went to show us, that Grow Oliver also lends itself to a nice little acronym, go, go, go. And it is something that you can play on and play around with for branding in the future. So we began back in the early summer 2019, working with the Downtown Action Committee, and began really doing some background work, building off of the work that we had completed earlier while working with Oliver. Moving into the fall, moving from vision and issues into goals, economic development goals and actions, and we're right now in our draft strategy. So we have been meeting with a lot of folks through the process, and this is just a little snapshot. We had 230 responses to an economic development strategy, which is actually pretty good. We've done some similar work in the region and are now working for Electoral Area A with RDOS, Rural Soyuz, And we've had, I think, one response to our survey so far. So we had a platform called Idea Share that was out there where it invites just ideas. People could put in their own ideas and look at other ideas that people had suggested, and then people could kind of rank ideas. So it's kind of a crowdsourcing tool to generate ideas. And we had over 350 ideas were suggested, and a lot of them have actually emerged and come into the strategy here, because there wasn't 350 separate ideas. There's some really consistent themes that were coming out. Jordan was at Festival of the Grape, where he had met with over 50 very happy people. We've had a couple of strategic planning sessions with Downtown Action Plan Committee. There's been some walking tours of downtown. The strategy itself is based around some principles and best practices from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and some national and provincial economic development organizations. And some of these are the ingredients that make up good plans. So strong local leadership with vision. That's you guys. Multifaceted, multifunctional initiatives. So there is no silver bullet. The best plans usually are diverse and a lot in local economic development. You talk about sort of economic gardening. So a series of small little actions all linked together in a single plot. Partnerships and collaborations. It's not just the town of Oliver. It's the town of Oliver and other partners. A long-term focus. The idea being transparent and accountable. So being open and involving the community in it. And actually, I left off something in the previous slide where we did meet with students last time we were up at the high school, and got a ton of great ideas, and we want to kind of pull them back and show them what has happened and what's come out of this so far, and keep them involved, because there's a real interest from them in staying involved in this work. And that it's proactive, that you're not always reacting to market shocks and changes. With the general theme here, this kind of harmonious little circle here where business development, local economic development supports a high quality of life, which in turn helps attract more business development and investment. And I think in Oliver you have some of these ingredients and components already. The other key thing before we jump into the plan is that really this is building on past work, so the Downtown Action Plan, but also the official community plan, which has an local economic development chapter and a downtown chapter. So it's building off of work that's being done. These are the objectives that our economic development goals that are underlying the strategy, and we, working with the committee, they helped us prioritize them, and together they support these 3 strategy areas, which we'll talk a little bit about now. So the first strategy area is consolidating our foundation, and these are the fundamentals that need to be in place to help grow economic development and implement the strategy. So it's really focused on coordinating economic development actors and initiatives, so bringing partners to the table, laying the groundwork for implementation and action, and continuing to involve and engage partners. Strengthen our heart, and that's strengthening Oliver from the inside out, and it's really focused on development opportunities, and in particular improving downtown, but also other opportunities and things that are underway. There's a child care study that is currently the RDOS is looking at for South Okanagan, and meeting child care needs as being a part of economic development, wayfinding, buy local programs and the like. So there's a number of actions that Jordan will be talking about in this area. And then the last one, growing opportunities, and that's on talking about expanding the town's appeal and collaborations with regional partners. And it's focused on strengthening partnerships, connecting local investors and entrepreneurs, improving regional connectivity, and bringing in more visitors. And this is a little snapshot. Here are the 3 areas, strategy area 1, 2, and 3, between 3 and 6 actions underneath each of them. And then they're divided between quick start actions, or 1 to 12 months, foundational actions, 1 year to 2 years, and then medium term 2 years plus. And this one, which shows that it's the same the same strategy areas and objectives, but up top here the same strategy areas and actions, and then up at the top here are those objectives that I was pointing out just a couple slides back. And just the tick marks indicating how some of these actions are addressing multiple objectives. And that's really important, that you're looking for actions that are going to tick a couple of boxes, that are going to help achieve multiple local economic development objectives. I'm going to pull up Jordan here, who's going to talk a little bit more about some of the underlying actions.
Thank you. So within this first strategy area, consolidating the foundation, kind of getting the fundamentals in place, we have a number of actions kind of focused on the core things that should be happening kind of first in order to get this strategy off the ground and get it moving. So this includes the Grow Oliver Committee. So this is the Downtown Action Committee, and maybe reframing the terms of reference, maybe looking at additional members, really ensuring that committee can take the strategy and, in addition to the work they're completing now, bring it forward. Looking at some sort of dedicated coordinator for the strategy. So either a staff person who can add this to their portfolio, or perhaps somebody else maybe shared through the RDOS. Part-time at first, but having somebody there who has the strategy core to their portfolio and can take it forward and kind of track how these actions go forward. And then the third within this first strategy area is this Grow Oliver Business Seat Package. And this is a thing we've heard a lot from folks who are interested in starting a business in Oliver, looking to kind of figure out what the market's like here, is having a one-stop shop for all the information they need about permitting, development, and then about the community more broadly. So housing, the economy, things like that. Also just having Randy's cell number in there, so they can ask him any questions they need. Awesome, thank you. Oh.
Whoa.
Oh boy.
There's a lot of clicking. What are you doing?
Nothing. He hasn't even touched it. It's just
It's
in
the
the
wow. Stuck.
Can you go
think so.
to,
Coronavirus.
Let's hope not.
Here, I can control it.
Okay, that would be great. I will not touch that anymore. Yeah, so in the second area, Downtown Oliver Seat Catalog, we inadvertently let a few of those images through. This is about looking at some key sites downtown and exploring some development opportunities, really looking at connections between areas. Downtown Oliver development feasibility, so once some thinking has gone forward on those, really getting into the details and getting a real estate economist, planner to look at these, figure out space requirements, figure out partnership models, figure out potential funding sources, and kind of run the numbers on them to see what is actually possible. Beautification and wayfinding. This is a huge one, and we were talking about it earlier today with the Downtown Action Committee. There's a real need for some really coherent wayfinding in Oliver, so that folks know how to get around, know where things are, and part of that is just drawing people off the highway as they drive through, driving regionally, getting some way of letting people know all the great stuff that is in Oliver that might be kind of off the main street. Buy local campaign, childcare program, this is going forward already, but just making sure that's integrated into all economic development planning initiatives going forward. Airport development ongoing, and then the food hub again. So this is about linking to past plans that have happened and just making sure those connections to economic development are clear. So Airport had a strategic plan in 2015, Food Secure Oliver came out recently, but there are real opportunities to take those forward and keep working on them through the economic development strategy. And then third, we have kind of these broader actions aiming at kind of expanding the appeal of Oliver, inviting others in. So one of these is relationship building with the Soyuz Indian Band. There are funds and programs available for real kind of targeted community to community forums. We understand you have council meetings occasionally with them, but just really formalizing those relationship we've seen across the province has really unlocked really incredible things in a lot of communities where municipalities and First Nations have partnered. Can start really small on economic development, but a lot of great things have grown out of that. Oliver Tourism brochure, talked about this again today, but just making sure that resources are available throughout the region that point people towards Oliver, make sure they know what's going on here, and kind of sell it. Festival of the Great, Center of Feasibility Study, so looking at some of the wine licensing discussions that are ongoing and looking at a central place for people to come and taste wine, buy wine. This has been an idea here for decades, but it's key and keeping that moving forward. And it looks like now maybe the pieces are in place to make that happen. Partner in parks. So the National Park Reserve, as it's moving forward, really positioning Oliver strategically to be in early on the discussions about how that can benefit this area and this town. Thinking about Oliver as a gateway community, if this is going forward, we've seen a lot of towns throughout the country where if they are kind of the hub or the center of a park like this, they can really see great economic development benefits come from that. Transit mobility, really foundational thing. Randy's working on a transit program with Transit right now. Co-working, hot desking feasibility, this fits in within some of these other broader planning initiatives around empty sites and vacant land downtown. Community investment cooperative, another really cool opportunity to get locals to put their money into other local businesses. These have been established in various communities around BC, and there's funding available for this kind of thing. Keeping to push forward shoulder season events, and then really taking advantage of the great cycling infrastructure in the region and pushing that forward with cycle tourism. All of these actions are split into these phases, so quick start, foundation, medium term. We saw that on a previous slide. And then this final piece, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, is really key to make sure that this strategy doesn't just sit on a shelf and gather dust, but continues to evolve and grow as Oliver does. So implementation, it's not just about staff and council ticking off boxes in a strategy. This is really successful economic development requires a whole community or key actors within the community to get on board, because they're the people who are going to start the businesses, they're the people who are going to run events and volunteer. And it's really about finding ways of mobilizing these local economic development champions and supporting them and letting them know that this is their strategy as well. And when they see things in here that they like, they can probably find ways to move those forward. And the monitoring and evaluation, we can go over this quickly. Basically, there are tools in here to make sure that the strategy is meeting the objectives that we presented initially, and also that the process behind it is being followed. I'll pass it back to John to go through a few of these actions in a little bit more depth and kind of open it up for any questions or discussions we might have.
I'll go through these pretty quickly so we can leave a little bit of time for questions, but the first one under Consolidate Our Foundation is growing the committee, whether it keeps the same name or becomes the Grow Oliver Committee, but taking the Downtown Action Committee and maybe adding, inviting wider participation, whether that is OIB, RDOS and their ECDEV arm, as I mentioned earlier, youth representatives, they were so keen to get involved, and then something like this might be an opportunity to engage and involve youth on this committee, because they had some great ideas, and they're ideas that we might miss ourselves, and I think it's a really good opportunity to kind of, these are the people, these are the future entrepreneurs and business owners, and we've got workers and the like here in Oliver, so getting them engaged and involved, and there seems to be real appetite there, at least when we were there at the high school. Community Futures, Okanagan, and others, and this draft was only just done really completed on Friday, but for each one of these actions, they're all broken out in more detail with a bit of a rationale for why the action's being put forward, why it's worth pursuing, an overview of the action, the lead partner or partners in some cases, the timeline, whether it's a quick start, a foundation, or a medium term, and then any additional details. So if on any of these you have some more questions, we can answer them, but also encourage you to take a look through the document. The idea of that dedicated Grow Oliver coordinator, should funding become available, and whether that person is from here, from town staff or a councillor wearing that hat, or potentially coordinating and cooperating with the South Okanagan Chamber of Commerce and others. But really that point person who is going to help move the strategy forward and be responsible for kind of some of the process monitoring pieces. The seed package, which we talked about just as one, and a lot of these ingredients and pieces are already there, so we know there are materials that are being produced already that are out there, and this information already exists. It's just a matter of kind of packaging the information up into a single little pro forma piece. So if a business owner comes in who's interested, they can be passed this package of information. And we had some great conversations with the owner of Grow Oliver, the owner of Oliver Eats, and he was talking about how he has a lot of friends and business associates who are quite interested, and just wishes that there's some way he could package up or send out information to someone. So we've been hearing it not just from him but from some other folks as well. Strategy area 2, strengthen our heart. We won't be getting into this today, but we are doing. So this is about looking at town-owned properties and the opportunities that might exist on them and the different uses that could exist, and the potential connections between people that could co-locate. Because, for example, if Town Hall were to move to the property on Main Street, that there'd be potential other co-locators there, meaning maybe I know they just moved, but perhaps the regional library. There's lots of examples of libraries being in shared spaces with town halls, so you're kind of activating it at different times of the day. A daycare, there's a study that's underway, and that there is some funding, for daycares. And we know there's a need for daycare, childcare here, so maybe there's an opportunity to bring it in there. From doing the housing needs assessment, we know that there's certain underserviced groups, and there might be opportunities to look at doing a small amount of housing there that could bring in funding from other funding opportunities. So looking at all the different mixes of uses that could happen on these different town sites that we looked at on Main Street, what could happen here if other people were, if Town Hall moved across the way, looking down at town-owned properties on Station Street as well. And this would be the follow-up piece to that, once exploring some of those opportunities a little bit further at this conceptual stage, digging in a little bit more and looking at, well, what would that actually look like? So what would it look like if we proceeded with going ahead with option X in lot Y? What would that cost? Who are some potential partners or co-locators who could be involved? What are some potential funding avenues that could be brought in and brought to bear? And then finally, grow our opportunity strategy area 3. Jordan was talking a little bit about this, but continuing to build the relationship with OIB and recognizing their role in the region as big economic development agents, and continuing that relationship building process with them. And again, we've had the opportunity ourselves to work on a number of joint economic development projects with local governments and First Nations, but I've also seen examples in other places across Canada, and it is a growing area and an area with a lot of opportunity in it. Oliver tourism brochure, we had a lot of discussion about this the last time. There are again these pieces, and there are a way of, it's not just a tourism brochure, but it's really the way of communicating and getting getting the word out about Oliver to the broader region and across Canada, but even looking at simple things like having rack cards at the airport in Penticton or in other places so that people can get access information easily and quickly about Oliver. And I think that's all we're going to do now. So I'd throw it open for if there are any questions or comments, because I think we're going to not get into the C guy portion. I know we've thrown a lot of, we're barely scratching the surface of what is, a almost 70-page document, 19 actions. There's a lot in here.
Questions, comments? Mayor Johansson?
You said there's 19 action items. I didn't see anywhere in here where they were prioritized or sort of recommended path to follow. I guess there's lots of paths to follow, but there's got to be a couple in your opinion that might be the most critical to get on board first, and that might be, I'm thinking maybe the coordinator position of establishing the working group are two things that probably have to happen to be able to even get into the other ones. So just wondering what your thoughts would be on that.
Well, you nailed them in two of them. So we have prioritized and organized them based on timing and the phasing. So they're the three types of actions. So with quick starts being kind of the low-hanging fruit. So the relatively low entry point, low cost opportunities that would help build momentum to start pursuing other activities, and also things that might need to happen first, like the committee and the Grow Oliver coordinator. So we do have that there, the seed package, which we are currently working on because we had some funds that were available in the funding that we got for this project that we thought as a value add, because it has these things have been a discussion topic in a lot of the work that we've done, these development opportunity sites. We have sort of started to do some work on that as a component of this project, so that's something that's underway. And then the Soyuz Indian Band relationship building and the tourism brochure, and you've already having council to council meetings, so those are kind of happening, but it's just moving that relationship forward. And with the Oliver tourism brochure, Oliver tourism, it seems there's already things that are happening there as well. So there is a general phasing there. One of the things that we did discuss in our last presentation for the committee is sometimes phasing can change because there'll be new opportunities, new funding opportunities, for example, that come up, new partnership opportunities that come up, or other ideas that weren't imagined here. So written into this is that you do want to have some flexibility, and so having someone who's a point person on this who can be aware and kind of guiding, shepherding it through, might be aware that, hey, there's a new funding opportunity for food hubs. We should really take advantage of that. And one of the things that we were talking about in the last presentation is having some of the opportunities identified in a document, whether it's your OCP or a strategy such as this, can go such a long way to help secure funds, because you're able to go back and say, we're not just applying to this because we see this as an opportunity, but we've seen this as an opportunity and begun doing some planning around it. And so it's a good way to build the case.
I guess the Grow Oliver coordinator, I'm just wondering, is that something you establish the committee first, or do you establish that person and then have them sort of run with it as the lead on that? Just wondering, sort of on chicken before the thing type of thing, yeah.
Well, we think that you kind of have the beginning, a very strong beginning of a Grow Oliver committee in the existing Downtown Action Committee. So that could be the beginnings of the Grow Oliver committee. So you have that piece, and then it would probably be for that committee a discussion topic, and there's some details, in the plan itself about moving that forward. And there would need to be some conversations as well with some of the partners or potential partners, like the Chamber, for example, or the Tourism Association, and even at staff level, to have some of these discussions about would be best suited to move it forward, who actually has capacity to take the work on, and probably if there isn't, what we'd recommend as well is there should be that one person, and if there is a funding that's available to support, 0.25 FT or something like that, it should still also be someone on council should have that as part of their portfolio, so that they are, responsible for that there's a staff member who has it on. Sorry, I just looked over at Randy there for some reason. I don't know why. There's a staff member who has that, as part of their portfolio, as part of their job description as well. That falls under their kind of work responsibilities. In addition to having someone on the committee and whatever group they're representing on that downtown action committee, remains to be seen, I guess.
Just one follow-up, so would you see the downtown committee becoming the Oliver committee, sort of changing their mandate, sort of in terms of reference, and becoming the lead on that committee and inviting those other entities, Chamber of Commerce, tourism, all to the table?
Yes, and I think some of those people are already at the table, and it's just a matter of kind of pulling focus up a little bit from downtown, because downtown is deeply connected. As downtown goes, so does Oliver, but pulling up the focus a little bit and looking a little bit broader regionally.
Councillor Minton.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that was one of my first questions. When I read through the plan earlier, like, we're all hurting for committee members no matter where we look. And so that seemed like the natural sort of progression of that committee. And without getting into too much detail, I also thought that it seemed to make sense that it would fit under the Director of Development Services portfolio, with perhaps the chamber seemed to make the most sense as a partner if we don't have capacity to do everything in-house. But I have a couple of questions. So would you say then, with all of these documents and all of these plans that we've created, mostly with you over the last couple of years, would like the guiding document then be the OCP with maybe the economic development document right underneath that, and then the food action advisory and the downtown revite and that sort of thing falling underneath? Like those are kind of the two main strategies?
Yeah, I think it's kind of it's the sum of its parts. So they're all doing slightly different things. So the OCP is an important document because it deals with built form, and there are parts of economic development that are tied to that. And I think the OCP already addresses some of those things, and there are downtown design guidelines that support some of the stuff that would be looked at as development opportunities. And then you would have your Grow Oliver strategy, which would effectively replace the downtown action plan as a guiding economic development strategy for the town. But then you'd also have, the food secure strategy would still be an important component that and they get referenced, they're kind of cross-referenced to one another. And in the OCP, it references the emerging Grow Oliver strategy, which was completed after the OCP was done. And there's references in Grow Oliver as well. So it's just kind of building those connections back and forth. So I think all of the plans play a role.
I have a couple of more specific questions. So because we've talked a little bit about the brochure, what would you envision being different about a new Oliver tourism brochure versus what we already have? And then my follow-up to that would be, if it is something different, or if it includes rack parks and airports and that sort of thing, and this might be more a question for staff, is that something that we would be taking on, or something that we could delegate to the Tourism Association?
That's a great question, and it was definitely something we talked about in our last meeting, because we had people from the Tourism Association here, and I'm just looking for the actual. So in the brochure, or the brochure action, we have as the lead the Tourism Association, so it's not a town lead that's responsible, because there are different leads that are identified across the 19 actions. Part of how this came up, and it's maybe getting into a bigger conversation about the identity of the wine capital of Canada, or Canada's wine capital, and Oliver tourism, and finding information, because there's already information that's out there. There's also a new tourism brochure that's soon to be released. by the association. And we were just bringing up the fact that, you know, sometimes when we've been going, as you know, vacationing through the area and also, you know, say coming through Penticton Airport, not being able to find information about Oliver, but, you know, there's a brochure for a Soyuz, or there's a rat card for Cloquet Falls. So just making it easier. It's not just a brochure, and this is one of the things that we're gonna change, and it was great to have, you know, this first initial conversations that it's not just the product, but also the process and how it's actually communicated.
Okay. And just as a follow-up for staff, do we have that ability then? So if we see things that are perhaps needing to be tweaked with what we already have or with product placement, is that something that we can delegate to the Tourism Association? I don't think we've done that before.
I do believe you can, because we have hired them to promote our area.
Okay, perfect. Another one of the more specific questions, in the Grow Oliver Committee, expanding the scope of the Downtown Oliver Action Plan, it was indicated that we should invite wider membership, including the Regional District Economic Development Coordinator. I don't think they have that position.
So there's in coming around to that, I didn't think they had that position either.
They
And
have one in Oak Falls. but
They
it's
had one,
specific to Oak Falls.
they had one, yeah, and there's an office in Oak Falls, I don't know if that's still
Yeah,
active.
it's
Okay.
specific to Oak Falls.
So when I was on the RDOS site and I'd been, we're doing a project in Area A and I'd been meaning to follow up on this, that they had 3 economic development staff at the RDOS, which they didn't have until quite recently. And we had assumed that was beyond just OK Falls.
Well, that will be
But that is why
interesting to find out.
that's why this is a draft.
Yeah, that will be interesting to find out, because I don't, as far as I know, there's just one specific to Oak Falls, but maybe things have changed. And then, okay, my final question is, if we're just scratching the surface today, when do we get to follow up and go all the way in?
That's a great question. We are hoping that over the next couple of weeks that you will have a chance to go all the way in and, you know, review this and share any feedback or input that you have. We're going to be sending all the input to Randy, who will be, you know, collating it, and then we'll be coming up with a revised draft in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you, Chairman Mattis. So question, and then I have a motion to put on the table. So I'm excited to hear that there was so much youth engagement in this program. So was it a specific class that you met with, or how did that happen?
There were 3 classes, right?
Yeah.
3.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we met with 3 classes, and it was making contact through a teacher who's been
Mr. Granberry?
Granberry, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it do you know which class it was?
Senior level social studies, I think.
Social studies.
Yeah,
Like career in life.
yeah.
Okay.
But they were more senior students.
Thank you. And I mean, I agree. I don't think we want this to just sit on the table and percolate any longer, because that's what's been happening for a long time. So I would like to move that council direct staff to look into the feasibility of a dedicated Grow Oliver coordinator.
One of the things that is interesting, so from the Downtown Action Plan, there were actions that were not completed from that, some of which were pulled into this, but there's actually a number of actions that were completed from, there's a much smaller number, I think there's only 6 or 8, I can't recall offhand, but there has been this kind of progress going forward, and the thing that always strikes me is that there always seems to be these new things that we're learning about. We talked about bike tourism today, and then just found out that as part of the new park development that's going in close to the bridge on Fairview there, that there'll be a bike repair facility that will be a part of it, which is great, because that kind of ties into, that's a big connector regionally, and so there's stuff that is going on, little things, so.
That's why I think it's important to have a dedicated coordinator so that they can pull all these pieces together.
Councillor Grace has put a motion forward. I don't know if we have a seconder or,
I'll second it, Chad Wood.
okay, seconded by Councillor Benavina. Discussion. Councillor Benavina?
My question would be, is the timing right to look into the feasibility of a coordinator without a finalized plan? Would we be perhaps jumping the gun a little bit? And if not, would that then include looking into possibilities such as partnering with chamber and or other organizations? And I guess my question is to staff.
Is that more a question or a statement?
No,
Yeah.
it's a question, it's a question.
Is that a rhetorical question?
No, it's not rhetorical at all, and I'm wondering, are we jumping the gun by looking into that before we have a finalized plan?
I would say not necessarily, because you're just asking us to check into it to see about the feasibility of having a coordinator over actually hiring a coordinator.
Okay.
I think that's what you were asking, correct?
It is.
Councillor Schwarzenberg.
Yeah, I think it, in my mind, it's slightly premature because I think we need to have a finalized report after we've all had a chance to look at it and do our thing, and a coordinator would have budget aspects to it. So I think, looking at it this early, I think we should hold off at least until the finished product is done, and then go forward with that. I think, again, that Oliver Tourism has a paid coordinator. The Food Action Committee has a paid coordinator, and those two pieces are integral parts of what this would be. So I think when staff looks at feasibility, they should also look at how those players would interact with either a Grow Oliver coordinator or are they going to make up part of that position maybe and take part of that into their realms.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Chair Mattis. I agree with everything Councillor Schwarzenberger said, except for the part about it being too early. I think that these things can happen alongside each other. I think while council is doing a deep dive into the plan, while the plan is being finalized, we can be looking at the feasibility of a position, which may include having tourism involved, food action coordinator involved, or something like that. But I don't think we need to wait till the plan's done and then start looking into feasibility of having a coordinator. We'll just keep that ball rolling now while we've got some momentum here and have the development of this plan in place.
Mayor Trans.
I just want some clarification on what are we looking at into the feasibility, the cost, or just feasibility is such a big word. I'm just kind of wondering, what are we actually asking staff to do? Look at a scope of work and the costs associated with that work, or is it just, I'm kind of wondering what feasibility means. If somebody's tasked me, said look into the feasibility of a Grow Oliver coordinator, what's the scope of that looking at, so to speak? That's kind of just what
and that's basically where I was coming from, like what would the budget implications be, which one of the staff members, desks would this fall onto, if it would be to sit with one of our staff members, or if it would go outside of our staff, but just to, see really if it's in the budget, if it falls under somebody's scope.
Councillor Benavina.
So my thoughts seem to be so far along the same lines as Councillor Schwarzenberger. I don't know how I want to keep the ball rolling while the ball's rolling, but if we're coming back in potentially a couple of weeks with our thoughts and comments, and solidifying the plan, that's not too far out, in my opinion, to start looking then at the feasibility at that point, because I don't think we 100% know who we're asking to do what and who we would be engaging as far as tourism, food action, chamber, until we have a finalized plan. So then my question would be, because you were at the meeting this afternoon, did this that position come up in conversation this afternoon? And if so, what did the committee think?
It didn't come up in conversation as far as should the town have that as a position. It just came up the same way it did here, that was one of the recommendations. But I think within the plan, the larger plan, am I correct that those actions all have somebody assigned to them already?
Yes, so the actions do have a potential lead, and for this action that is in discussion now, the lead is split between the South Okanagan Chamber of Commerce and the Town of Oliver. But it does, there are, in the detail section, it talks about some of the implementation tasks, which would presumably be things that you would be considering in terms of feasibility around the actual potential scope of work for the coordinator and what they would be doing. And we've identified in this, in the draft, there are 7 actions that they could potentially be, help implement themselves to help get a sense of that. So I think there is some information here that would be helpful in your discussion about what that position could look like, and new information that we've learned since then, like about the funded food secure Oliver funded position, to get the terminology right.
Mayor.
I was just wondering if maybe we could ask staff to identify the capacity of where this position would sit. If it would sit within the town of Oliver, and if it was sitting within the town of Oliver, what's the capacity of that position to be, the workload of that position to be absorbed with the current staff complement that we have now? And how much, like, it may sit with Director of Development Services, and he has the capacity to take on 0.2 of an FTE, and after that, I would need additional wages to support additional work coming from the town of Oliver. Perhaps that might be something to at least look at, potentially.
I mean, I feel like that falls in within what I was asking, but if we need to amend the motion to include that, that's.
Or just clarify, I'm just trying
Yeah.
to determine exactly what we're trying to determine.
For myself, I'm not prepared at this time to dedicate staff time. I think it's too early in the process until the report is finalized, until we've had a chance as a council to individually digest it, and then probably dedicate a full committee of the whole meeting for all of us to talk together about what our action plan and strategy is. I think before we invest staff time in that, we need to understand what we're going to do with the strategy. So that at this point, until we get together and with a finalized strategy as a council and discuss it as a group, I would not be prepared to invest staff time. Councillor Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, would it be part of your, say, final report that you might have some recommendations on how Oliver Tourism and the Chamber and the Food Action people would, what parts they would play in this, and what you would envision that a Grow Oliver committee would, is it gonna be, is most of it gonna be tourism, or is, I'm just trying to get an idea if, to look forward to this, when we look at feasibility of a coordinator, I think it would be very difficult for staff if they didn't understand, because I see a lot of things that overlap with tourism, and tourism obviously sees things that overlap here as well. And then you've got UA, the wineries involved, and the chamber, which is not just Town of Oliver Chamber, it's the South Okanagan Chamber. Those are all pieces that need to fit together somehow.
Definitely, and that's what we're hoping to get. We do have representatives from most of those groups sitting on the committee, and then those groups that aren't represented would be receiving a copy and be asked for comment, and they'll be directed to especially look through the section, because there are 19 actions, and there are leads that have been identified or potential leads in this draft. And in this action in particular, and based on the Downtown Action Plan project, we had actually suggested given their existing role in local economic development and the benefits that additional funding could that additional funding to support and grow Oliver coordinator position could provide the organization, the South Okanagan Chamber of Commerce, could benefit from this action. So looking at it as an action that could actually potentially support the chamber, which I know has a regional focus, but also struggles with some of its own, funding operations and coordinators. So there are a few things to, I think, unpack in that. But we're hoping that we'll be getting direction from the groups that this is going out to.
Any further discussion? Councillor Price?
Thank you, Councillor Adams. So I feel that regardless of where we land after we digest this plan, we're still gonna want a coordinator position. I think that the coordinator position and the committee are the top two priorities of this plan. So it still makes sense to me that we can look into whether or not we have capacity to fund the position or not while we're all digesting this plan.
Any further discussion? Councillor Van.
Thank you. So I'm not prepared to vote in favor, but I don't want that to make it appear that I'm not in favor of a coordinator, because I do believe that this plan, like the food action plan, like all of our other plans, you need a champion to carry it forward. And at this point, I think that will be a necessary person at some point, but I personally feel that we need to come back with our comments, as well as hear the comments from the public and all that's going on to before we finalize the plan, and we know who in the end will be engaging and will take the lead.
What she said.
Any further discussion? Call the question, those in favor?
This is gonna be lovely.
Opposed? Motion fails. Okay, any further discussion or questions?
Thanks for the plan.
CAO.
Thank you very much, Chair Mattis. With respect to the C plan, which we didn't really look at today, I would like to have a meeting of all of council along with the gentleman that has started doing some of the work on this, and John and Jordan, so that you can really get down and look at some of the landscaping architectural work that's been done, and get that finalized, so that we have that going forward, and you have so that we can prioritize stuff when we look at that. Okay?
Totally agree. I think there's a definite need for council to get together as a group and talk about all of the things within the plan, and I think that's, until we go through it on almost a page by page basis, it'll be very difficult for us to give feedback, which was one of the things I heard you ask for right at the start of the meeting, was feedback. What we have today is just too much of a skeleton to give a whole bunch of feedback. We're gonna have to get into the nuts and bolts at a later date. Mayor Johansson?
Yeah, I just had a question about, when was the last time the OCP, when was the last time the OCP was adopted?
2017.
Last year.
So it's
2017.
years. So anything that comes out of this that challenges anything in the OCP, we can amend
One or the other.
one or the other.
It goes in
Okay.
concert with our OCP, doesn't it?
I hear that it's in concert with the OCP, but through this process, through the C, strategy and looking at the downtown, we may change some of the things that we thought were, council of the day thought were a good idea in 2017 to make, just to give us the flexibility to go wherever we need to go.
Yes, but the OCP also, I think, has, at least in the area that is being, where these properties exist in the downtown area, there is a lot of inherent flexibility that is built into the OCP in that particular area. And I wouldn't foresee any, unless you're thinking of building an explosives plant down there.
No, I'm not suggesting that we open up the OCP or review the OCP. It was just more of a process question, just sort of, it's possible you could run into something that you go, okay, well, this might be a good thing.
I think the OCP is almost specifically vague in that area to give us the flexibility to run the community.
Perfect.
No further questions or discussion? Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time and effort, and I look forward to the final result and getting together with all of you to go through the nuts and bolts.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Business 2, 555 Earle Crescent, removal from the Community Heritage Register, and I will refer this item to the Director of Development Services for some background information. So, Council, we can have a discussion.
Thank you, Chairman Mattis. So the intent of this report is to seek a recommendation from Council to remove the single-family dwelling located at 555 Earle Crescent from the Community Heritage Registry prior to it being demolished. So the house at 555 Earle was built in 1936. It's 1,500 square feet in size. So as per the attached statement of significance in your package, this home and several others on Earle Crescent are recognized primarily as the homes of Oliver's first privileged class, which was the designers and engineers of the ditch. So although this dwelling is located and listed on the Community Heritage Register, it's not protected from demolition or alteration. Two buildings in Oliver, the museum and the Visitor Center building, are protected from demolition or alteration via heritage protection bylaws, which were adopted in the early 1980s. So this building and this property in particular has had many bylaw complaints and police attending the property over the past few years. So on July 12, 2019, a fire severely damaged the dwelling at 555 Earle Crescent, leaving it in poor structural condition and a nuisance to the community, given that it's being used periodically as a place for vulnerable individuals seeking shelter from the elements. A property managed company has now been appointed as the receiver of the property and are intending on demolishing the property. So although this is not an ideal outcome, given that it's listed on the Heritage Registry, it is a necessary one, given both the hazards and visual nuisances that an abandoned, burnt-out building poses. So the proper course of action is to remove it from the list prior to its demolition. So given the current state of the building, and as evident in the photos attached, staff recommend removal of the dwelling from the list to facilitate the demolition of the structure. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. All right, comments from council? Any questions? Councilor Swartz?
No question, just a comment. I think the building has to come down, so if we have to deregister it first to make that happen, that's the proper course of action.
Thank you. Mr. Houle, was there any type of study received from the property management company outlining what it would take to restore the building as opposed to demolishing the building?
Thank you, Chairman Mattis. No, they didn't provide any study. I mean, it was our position that demolition was the best course of action, and that's what they had gone along with. I think the CEO may be able to add a bit more information regarding the fact that it's owned by the bank and what restrictions that places on them. If the CEO could add some information, please.
Thank you.
Did we do an actual site visit and look inside?
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at the building, the fire chief's been in there, the building inspector's been in there, and we've provided information as to what it would take to, the building inspectors provided comments to them, like what would be required if you actually were to restore it, and it's just a significant amount of work involved, so. But I think it'd be helpful to have a bit more comment from the CEO.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. From what I've heard from the lawyers, et cetera, is that the bank owns the property, like it doesn't necessarily own, it's in foreclosure, so it's a debt to the bank, and they can get their money out of it without a home being on it. So they don't want to incur costs in order to receive the funds that they need from it.
Have we ever refused a demolition permit?
Not in the time I've been here that I'm aware of.
There is a motion on the board.
I'll move the motion.
Proposed motion that council remove the single-family dwelling at 555 Earle Crescent from the Community Heritage Register, and that council direct staff to send a letter to the Heritage Minister notifying of this removal, moved by Councillor
conversation if it were a private owner instead of a bank. So they've indicated that they need to demolish because they can get their money out if it's an empty lot. But if we were talking with a homeowner who faced this same issue with a registered site, would we be having a different conversation?
Through the chair, no, because it's not protected with respect to renovations or demolition. So if a property owner, even though it's on the registry, if a property owner wanted to demolish it because it's not protected, they have that right to do that.
Sorry, yeah, just to add to that, yeah, I mean, ultimately, the way it's sitting now, it's not a good situation. And it's been like that for, it's almost a year now, so either they demo it, or they renovate it, right? So that's sort of the question. That's why we've been proceeding with dealing with it, right? And now they've advised that demolition is the route they wanna go, so.
Thank you. Hearing no further discussion, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, moving along. 2020 council policy review. I'll refer this to the corporate officer. I believe this came out of a meeting a couple months ago. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Mattis. The report before council is to bring council policies forward. We did bring it forward in January 27th at the 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting. All of the policies were attached with a spreadsheet. Falling out of time and wanting to have the whole committee together with Councillor Mattis, we're bringing back just 10 policies at a time, and we'll go through each 10, and council can make a recommendation to staff on which ones they want further review or rescinding or carrying on with as it is currently presented. So the first policy that's listed, going in alphabetical order, is the acting mayor protocol. This policy was brought in May 8th, 2017, and it outlines the protocol for council when they're in their acting mayor role. And it's the schedule that each council member holds to serve as acting mayor, for attending events. If there's any changes to the acting mayor's schedule between themselves, councillors get together and make a determination on who's able to sit in. There is support from our deputy corporate officer for events that councillors may be attending, and expectations as well. This evening we have Councillor Mattis sitting in the chair position at the Committee of the Whole, signing on documents and other actions is specific to emergencies. If the mayor is beyond 100 kilometers, there would be some discussion on the acting mayor and then an alternate acting mayor who would support each other if the mayor is away. So I can refer that policy back to council to advise if there's any changes that they wish to make to this policy.
Thank you. Councillor Benton.
I don't have any changes that I want to make, being that it's a fairly new policy, but I just wanted to comment on the last item, the case of emergency, 2 councillors being on standby, basically. Unless I'm just one of the councillors that's never been called on. I don't think, do we do that? Or I don't think, do we
Yeah.
always have 2 councillors on standby when the mayor's more than 100 kilometers away?
I would refer to the following mayor or acting mayor. If we were going to go into a state of local emergency,
Okay, so
I would call upon the
just follow the regular
Yes.
acting schedule.
One moment. Is this something that could be combined with our code of conduct? In a word, no. I'm only asking just as a way of having fewer policies and fewer items. I think that was the whole purpose of this, is to consolidate and coordinate and put things more so, if there's another area where we can put a policy, we should take this opportunity to do it, and that's why I asked the question. Mayor Vanessa?
I'm just wondering about the rotation. It seems to stay the same every year once it's been established at the beginning of a term. I'm just wondering if that should somehow change. You know, as if you're the councillor during January, February, March, there's other events that you could possibly want to take part in or have opportunity to take part in, but when you're only acting mayor during those same 3 months every year. So that was one reason.
I would suggest that if there are events that you'd like to attend even while the mayor's here, that you voice that to the mayor or the acting mayor at the time. And they would probably be more than happy, you know, because I know Larry definitely wants to go again next year to the senior center.
Yeah.
the 50th.
Absolutely.
No, I know that. I mean, Amy wants to go and do the cadet review, and I think you're acting mayor at that particular time.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have no, you know, as mayor, if anybody wants to do anything, I think I'm gonna need to be asking somebody to go do the commencement speech at the SOSS this year. That won't be available for that, so if anybody's interested in putting it up on the table at this point in time. But that was all I was just wondering.
You had a response.
I did have a response. When we bring forward the schedule of meetings for the new year, we also bring forward the rotation.
Okay.
And we ask council members if there's any change.
Mhm.
So there is that, we do that at that point in time.
Councilor Grace?
And just to note, the summer slot really works well for me, so I'd like to say
Okay.
Mhm.
That's great, yeah.
Okay, so I think that we're leaving that one alone, if I heard correctly. Moving on, the next one is the Airport Advisory Committee Terms of Reference.
Thank you, Chair Mattis. The Oliver Airport Advisory Committee Terms of Reference was brought in February 8th, 2010. There have been a few slight amendments, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that have been approved by council. The latest one that I'm aware of, the change was for the term of the airport advisory, being that it shall be the 4-year term of council. So when we have a new term of council, we go out and look for a new term of the advisory committee members. If there's any changes that council wishes to provide to this terms of reference for the committee.
Councilor Van Buren?
So that, thank you, that specific one that was just pointed out is the one that I had highlighted.
Okay.
Even though it is our most recent change, reading through it again and thinking about it, it does make sense that the airport committee works on the same 4-year terms we do. But I was just thinking that it might be wise to stagger them as opposed to having the new committee elected in the same year or like very shortly after a new council for a couple of reasons. We have a really well-functioning group, but who's to say that's always the case? And you wouldn't want somebody coming in on a slate of, kicking out the old board to bring in a new board and being able to do that because the timelines line up. And also, on the complete flip side, if you have a whole new council that perhaps doesn't know a lot about the airport and how it's run and the operations, all that sort of thing, you might end up with just the same committee simply because nobody knows any better at the time. So it just, in my mind, makes sense to stagger them off a little bit.
For continuity?
Well,
Stagger for continuity?
yeah, basically, so like every 2 years, maybe, you're doing one or the other.
Half every 2 years.
Yeah, so you still have, like, the terms match, they're not off of each other, but they're just staggered. I don't know if that makes sense to everyone else.
Makes sense to me. Probably, and we'll come up with some type of direction to staff here at the end. There may be other things that come up. For me, I see these policies for each committee, and I'm wondering if we can't have a universal, instead of the Oliver Airport Advisory Committee terms of reference, it would be Oliver Council Committees terms of reference. And it would be similar but different. And what I mean within that is, when you look through our policies, each committee has their own policy. And I'm wondering if we can't have a standard policy for all of our committees, that this is how we appoint. our committees, so that it isn't just the airport advisory committee, it's also the downtown committee, it's also, and within that, you know, when you look at, there's certain things that are specific to this committee, but that doesn't mean that that can't be mentioned within the policy, that it's specific to this committee or another committee, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel each and every time that we start up a committee. It's just a thought. Councillor Benby.
So, thank you. Your last point is exactly what I was gonna say, that each committee has its own, well, not all of them, but most of them are gonna have their own uniqueness. Like, we're comparing these two, for example, just the number of members, where they come from is so different than the downtown advisory committee.
But that can be laid out in the policy itself. That
Potentially.
this committee will have this committee will have this membership, and it's just one policy instead of
So
five
it's just
different policies.
a 5-page policy instead of 5 individual policies.
No, yeah, it would be a 5-page policy and available in one spot as opposed to 5-page policies and available in different spots. Yes,
Thank you, Chair Mattis. You might, each committee has a different responsibility, like they look at different things as opposed to them all doing sort of the same thing. They all have their own terms of reference per se. So you would end up with a rather large document because each one would have to spell out what you would like them to do for the, like what the responsibilities are. They're not all the same in each one of the committees.
I understand what you're saying, and when I look at this particular one, what you're talking about there is the purpose and the membership. Okay?
Yeah.
That's different for each committee, but beyond that, it's pretty much the same for every committee.
Responsibilities too.
You know, appointment of the committee members is the same for every committee.
Sometimes
Responsibilities and duties is pretty much the same for every committee. The procedures, election and duties, it's the same throughout the committees, but the first little bit is different for each one, but after that, it's all the same. Is what my point is, and there's no point having 5 different policies when it can be covered under one. I'm just throwing out the potential, that's all.
Mhm.
Yeah. Corporate officer.
No, Councillor Benson, the only thing.
No, go ahead. Councillor
I
Brown.
was just gonna ask, I found a couple more scribbles that I had on that same policy, so shall I throw them all out there right now, or are we gonna bring this one back at another date and then we can?
Well, if we're gonna give staff direction on this particular policy,
Give it now?
it should all be out there now.
Well, then I have some more direction.
Good. That's why we're here.
Just, item 5D is 2 members of the airport committee, constitutes a quorum. Just seems awfully small, because
Mhm.
that's, 2 members, 1 must be a council member, so that's effectively like the council liaison, and 1 committee member forms a quorum. Seems kind of small to me, so I thought at least it should be 2 committee members. I don't know what everybody else thinks about that.
Committee, yeah.
That's a- That might have been a oversight on what a quorum is.
Okay. Check into that. And my last question is the appointment and duties of the airport committee secretary. Do we have one of those on this committee?
Secretary,
Hmm.
it would be
That'd be the
staff
assistant.
member.
Oh, it's a
Staff.
staff member?
Yeah, the
Assistant
minute taker.
corporate officers, usually they're taking minutes.
Okay, it doesn't say that in the actual appointment duties on there, that's why I wasn't sure. I thought it was a staff member, but
Yeah.
it didn't spell it out there.
Yes.
Thank
So,
you.
On this particular one, I don't see any notes coming up on the board, but if I understood correctly, there'd be a change to the quorum size.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And staff would also look at the possibility of integrating all of the committees into one, into one policy. And then the third item was the staggering of the appointments.
Mhm.
Do you need a motion for direction to look into those things?
I'm
Or
just
you're
making the
bringing it back?
notes, so
You're
that's
making
fine.
notes and bringing it back.
Mhm.
That's exactly what we're looking for. I know that we have some other items to cover in our closed meeting. I don't think that that'll take very long. Maybe we can move on and get one more done before we go into closed. which would be the anti-racism.
That's basically covered under your code of conduct and no bullying, so it can.
That was gonna be my
Gone.
point as well, is that, you know, that it's not that we're going to rescind it because we're not in favor of it, we're going to rescind it because if it isn't covered in all of our code of conduct for all of our different fire department and public works and staff and council, then certainly we wanna give direction that it be in there. But if it is in there, then certainly we should be rescinding this particular policy. Comments?
I'll move that we rescind the anti-racism policy.
Seconded by Mayor Johansson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried. So I think we will leave it at that so that we can move into close at this point. Public question period, I don't see any public here, so before we do that,